I met him when I was 20. At the time, I had just graduated from college and was trying to figure out my life. I was working part-time at this small cafe near campus, a hangout spot for local kids. And he was one of the regulars. Every week, there was always a day he'd show up, sit in the corner by the window, order the same coffee, and open his laptop like he was busy. At first, I didn't really pay attention, just gave him a polite smile when taking his order. But over time, he started talking to me. At first, it was just small stuff, asking about coffee or what time my shift ended. But slowly, the topics turned more personal. He started asking where I went to school, who I lived with, what I was doing lately. It never felt pushy. The way he asked things felt casual, comfortable. You know that kind of person, someone whose way of speaking makes you feel seen, valued. Every time he talked, I felt like I mattered. Not because he complimented me or anything, but because he actually listened. His eyes didn't wander, he was focused. And that made me, someone who at the time felt pretty lost, feel noticed. From there, we started talking more. Sometimes he'd wait until my shift ended just to sit and chat outside the cafe. Then we exchanged numbers, started texting, and a few weeks later, we were hanging out regularly. Eating at cheap places, sitting in his car listening to music, sharing random stories like two people who had been friends for years. I don't know why, but from the very beginning, everything just flowed. He slipped into my life slowly, but deeply. And back then, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I remember so clearly the first time we hung out alone in his car. It was a Saturday night, already pretty late, and we didn't know where to go, so we just drove around looking for a quiet spot. We ended up parked by this small lake not too far from town. It was dark, but peaceful, just the sound of crickets and the fading music from passing cars. He turned on his playlist, and I still remember the first song he played, some indie track I'd never heard before, but somehow it fit the vibe of that night perfectly. We sat there for a long time, no rush. He started asking about my childhood, about my family, small things most people never care about. And I told him, little by little. Things I usually kept to myself just started coming out that night for some reason. He didn't interrupt. He listened to everything like it was the most important thing he'd ever heard. He didn't give advice, didn't try to sound wise. He just listened, and sometimes nodded and smiled. That night, I felt really close to him. Not just physically, but emotionally. There was something about the way he sat in silence, paying attention, that made me feel safe. Have you ever felt like you could say anything to someone, and they wouldn't judge you? That's what I felt that night. Like, finally, there was someone who understood me without me having to explain everything, without me having to try to be the best version of myself. In that moment, I truly believed he was someone who could accept me just the way I am. Not long after that, we officially became a couple. It all happened so naturally, no dramatic confessions or big moments, but it wasn't vague either. We both knew where the relationship was heading. And honestly, for the first few months, it felt like a dream. He was incredibly attentive. Every morning, there was always a "you awake yet?" text. Then in the afternoon, he'd ask what I had for lunch. And at night, he'd call, even if just for 5 minutes. He often stopped by the cafe just to bring me coffee, saying it was so I wouldn't get tired from standing too long. Whenever I came home from work exhausted or in a bad mood, he always knew exactly what to say. He could be the softest, kindest person I'd ever met. And back then, I truly thought, this is it. This is the person I've been looking for all along. But over time, little things started to feel off. It started really small, like the time I said I was going to hang out with some old high school friends. He just paused for a bit, then said, "All right, just be careful, okay?" Whoa. His tone was calm, no anger at all, but his face looked disappointed, and I instantly felt guilty. After that, I started thinking twice before going out with friends. Things like that kept happening. Sometimes he'd say, "I just worry, you know? I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or anything bad to happen." Like the time I told him I was going to meet up with an old high school friend I hadn't seen in ages, his reaction was weird. He didn't get mad, there was no raised voice, no argument, but his expression changed. His eyes looked different, disappointed, but like he was trying to hide it. He stayed silent long enough to make things awkward, then finally said softly, "Okay, just be careful, all right? I just don't feel comfortable with you being around them." Whoa. And then he immediately changed the subject, like he didn't want to talk about it anymore. But his words stuck with me. I kept thinking about it all night. And it wasn't like this friend of mine was shady, just an old buddy who happened to be in town and wanted to grab a quick coffee. But his reaction made me start questioning myself. Was it wrong to meet up with a guy friend? Did I come off as unfaithful? And that was the first time I started second-guessing myself anytime I wanted to meet someone. Not because he ever directly told me no, but because of his expression, his tone, and the way his words made it sound like he was just worried. Well, every time I said I wanted to meet someone, he always had a reason why it made him uncomfortable. And me, still thinking it was just him caring, started to believe maybe I should be more careful with his feelings. Maybe it was normal for a boyfriend to not want us getting too close to other people. And from there, my circle got smaller. Little by little, I stopped checking in with old friends, started saying I'm busy or maybe next time more often, even though the truth was I just didn't want to fight. Or more accurately, I didn't want to see him make that same face again. Things like that started happening more and more. Like the time I played a song in his car, a song I usually listened to when I was alone, something that helped calm my mind. He immediately commented, "Your music is so dark, it ruins the vibe." Whoa. His tone was casual, not mean or anything, but it was enough to make me feel guilty right away. I didn't say anything at the time, but from that day on, every time we drove together, he'd always be the one to connect his phone to the car's Bluetooth. His playlist would play, songs he said were more positive. Whoa. And I just went along with it, because I didn't want to make things weird. But deep down I thought, since when did the music I liked become a problem? Then, my Instagram started getting targeted too. He said some of the accounts I followed were toxic, that they were all about showing off, unhealthy, and messing with my mindset. He didn't force me to unfollow them, but every time he saw a story he didn't think was worth watching, he'd say, "Aren't you tired of seeing this kind of stuff all the time?" Whoa. At first, I ignored it, but over time, I started thinking maybe he had a point. Eventually, I began unfollowing them. Old friends, meme pages, quote accounts, one by one, I let them go. And from there, it wasn't just my social media that changed, but also the small daily routines in my life. Little things that used to bring me comfort, that helped me feel like myself, I slowly started letting them go too. And the craziest part is, I didn't even realize it was all happening so fast. Slowly but surely, I began losing parts of myself. Not because he told me to, but because I felt like I had to. And the thing that kept me from realizing it all along was the way he spoke. He never raised his voice, never yelled, never slammed doors or used harsh words. And that's exactly what made it harder to recognize. Every time he didn't like something, he'd express it so gently. But his words stuck. They didn't hurt right away, but they lingered. Like they slowly crept into my mind, making me constantly second-guess myself. And what's even weirder, he was really good at wrapping all his wants in words that sounded wise. Like, "I just want us to take care of each other." Whoa. Or, "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." That's why I'm saying this. But what I really felt wasn't protected, but restricted. Not understood, but shaped into what he wanted me to be. Every time I tried to be myself, like when I shared something I was excited about, or when I posted little things I liked on Instagram, his reaction was never outright negative. But there was always some little comment that made me feel wrong. Maybe it was the look on his face, like he was disappointed, or the way his voice went quiet but heavy, or that blank stare that made the whole room feel cold. And you know what that feels like? It feels like walking through a room full of glass, and you're scared of stepping on the wrong piece because everything might shatter. Every time I did something slightly outside of his standard, this weird guilt would creep in, guilt with no clear reason. And over time, without even realizing it, I stopped doing the things that made me feel at ease. Not because he told me to stop, but because I couldn't stand feeling wrong all the time. The first time he hurt me, it didn't even look like violence. We were arguing about something small, like who was supposed to pick up who that day. Our voices were getting louder, but nothing harsh yet. Then suddenly he pushed me. Not hard, but enough to make me take a step back and lose my balance for a second. He immediately pulled me into a hug, said he just lost control, said he was upset because he felt unappreciated. And me, I didn't say anything. I still thought it was just a small incident, something that sometimes happens in adult relationships. But what I couldn't forget wasn't the push. What stuck with me was his smile. Not a relieved smile, not an apologetic smile. It was a small smile at the corner of his lips, flat, like he was testing my reaction. Like he had just tried something, and now he knew he could get away with it. After that, everything started to change. Every time we fought, something would get broken. At first it was just stuff. He'd smash a glass, slam the table, but soon, it moved to me. He grabbed my arm when I tried to walk away, pushed me against the wall when I talked back. Sometimes the pushes were so hard I fell. And that night, the worst night, he hit me. Not just one punch, not just a burst of anger. He shoved me into the wall, then shoved me again until I fell to the floor. He kicked me in the stomach twice, then sat on top of me and hit my chest. Not in anger, but calmly. No yelling, no emotional outburst. He was quiet, his face was blank. And that's what scared me the most. It looked like something he'd been playing out in his head for a long time, not a sudden impulse. I remember trying to escape. I looked for my phone, gone. Tried to grab the car keys, gone too. He had taken everything. He locked the door and told me I needed to calm down. I was already panicking, but in the end, I forced myself to open the back window and ran out of the house barefoot. I walked fast, shaking, still in pain, until I reached the nearest 24-hour convenience store. I asked the cashier to let me use the phone and called the police from there. When they arrived and saw me, bruises all over, torn t-shirt, dirty feet, they arrested him on the spot without asking too many questions. And I just stood there on the side of the road, watching him get handcuffed while screaming, saying he loved me, that he just wanted to talk things out. And the craziest part, the next morning I went back to the police station. Yeah, I was the one who came. I asked to see him. He was sitting in the interrogation room, eyes swollen, crying while holding my hand, saying he was under a lot of stress, saying he couldn't live with the label of being an abuser. He said he was just in a dark place, needed time to heal. He promised he would change. He hugged me in that room and said, "I just need you to help me get better." And me, still believing that people could change if given a chance, I believed him. I dropped the charges. I paid for a lawyer to get the case closed. I told the police it was just a misunderstanding between partners. And when he finally got released, all those promises disappeared. He got worse. Now he didn't even bother apologizing. He started locking me in the house when he got mad. He hid my wallet, my phone, took away my motorbike keys. He started criticizing my appearance every day, said I looked tired, said my body looked like someone who wasn't even trying to live. I couldn't talk back, because every time I responded, he'd push me again. Sometimes I'd fall, sometimes I'd hit the table, and every single time, he said the same thing. "This is because you make me angry." He said I was too weak, too sensitive, too spoiled to handle a real adult relationship. And slowly, I started to believe him. I started to think maybe it was my fault. Maybe I really wasn't strong enough. Maybe I didn't deserve love unless it came with pain. And that's when I stopped. I stopped asking, stopped complaining, stopped fighting back. I just went quiet, stayed quiet. I don't remember exactly how long I lived like that. Every day just blurred into the next. There was no difference between morning or night. I didn't wake up because of an alarm. I woke up because of fear. I didn't fall asleep because I was tired, but because I'd cried myself out. My whole life became about guessing his mood. Every move I made, every word I said, had to be thought through twice. Because even the smallest thing, putting a glass down too loud, a tone he thought was sarcastic, could set him off. And when that happened, there was nothing I could do but give up. Sometimes he'd stand in front of the door when I tried to leave the house, not saying anything, just standing there, quiet, watching me like a prison guard. Once, I tried to open the door slowly, but he dragged me back inside, threw me onto the couch, screamed at me, and then suddenly went quiet, sat next to me, and in a soft voice said, "I'm just scared you'll leave me." And the strangest part is, some part of me believed it. Like I was being pulled into this confusion, yelled at, then hugged, then told I was loved. And all of that made me doubt, made me wonder, maybe he was like this because he was afraid, not because he was cruel. I once tried to ask for help. When he was in the shower, I managed to open my phone and was about to send a message to a friend, but before I could press send, he was already there. He snatched my phone, looked through all the chats, then slammed it on the floor. That night he pushed me into the bathroom and locked the door from the outside. I sat on the cold floor, wearing thin clothes, shivering, and outside, he was singing. His voice was soft, like nothing was wrong, like I was just having a nightmare, when in reality, I was locked up with no one knowing. After a while, I started thinking, maybe he was right. Maybe I was being dramatic. I was too much, too difficult. Every time he said I was spoiled or weak, I believed him. And every time he said all of this was because he loved me, I accepted it. Because it's easier to blame yourself than to accept the reality that the person you love, the one you trust, turns out not to be a safe place. Until one day, we had a huge fight. This time he couldn't hold his anger anymore. He pushed me so hard I fell and hit my head on the corner of the table. My vision was blurry. My head hurt like hell. But all he said was, "You caused all this." He kept yelling, provoking me, shoving me while ranting about all my mistakes. And finally, I said the thing he was waiting for. I told him I couldn't live like this anymore. Right after that, he called the police and said I was a threat to myself. Within hours, an ambulance arrived, and I was taken to a psychiatric hospital. Strangely, in the place most people are afraid of, the place they say is full of crazy people, that's where I felt safe. It was so ironic. At first I was furious, absolutely pissed. I thought, why am I the one locked up in here? Why not him? Why is someone like me, who just wants to be free from pain, treated like the problem? But after a few days in there, things slowly started to change. No one knew me, no one knew my past, but they listened. They didn't judge. They didn't ask why I was stupid enough to go back to someone who hurt me over and over again. They just listened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen as a human being. I met other patients who had also been broken, had also been scared, had also felt alone like me. And right there, I realized maybe I wasn't that shattered. Maybe I could still laugh, still share stories without having to watch my tone, without fearing it would be thrown back at me. And that was my turning point. Not because of therapy, not because of medication, but because I finally understood if I don't leave now, if I don't save myself, no one will. No one's coming to rescue me. No one will know what I've been through if I don't walk away. So that day, in a room with peeling wall paint and half-lit lights, I made the most important decision of my life. I had to get out of his life. Now. Not later, not tomorrow, now. The moment I got out of the psych ward, the first thing I did was block every possible way he could reach me. His number, social media accounts, email, I deleted everything. I even changed my phone number, reset all my passwords, and asked my closest friends not to share any info about me to anyone. But still, a few days later, he came to my house. I saw him from behind the window. He broke the front gate, slammed it over and over until it made this loud clanging noise. He yelled my name, cursed me out, said I abandoned him, called me a coward. I stood behind the door, out of breath, hands shaking, my heart pounding like I was being chased. But I didn't open the door. I didn't answer. I just stood there, silent. And that was the first moment in my life where I felt like I had control. Not because I wasn't scared, I was terrified. But I realized I didn't have to give him space anymore. I was already broken enough because of him. And this time, I wasn't going to let him touch my life again. He came back 2, 3 more times, each time angrier, louder, but I held on. And finally, he stopped. Not because he realized anything or changed, but because he couldn't play me anymore. He couldn't use guilt or tears or fake promises to keep me around. My door was shut, and this time, the key was in my hand. But that fear never really went away. Even though he hasn't shown up again, even though his number's been blocked for a long time, and even though everyone keeps telling me I'm safe now, my body doesn't believe it. Some nights, I still feel like someone's watching me from behind the window. Even when the lights are off, the curtains are shut tight, and there's no one out there. But that feeling, that sense that he's still around, always creeps in when I'm alone. Not because I'm paranoid, not because I'm being dramatic, but because that wound isn't healed. The wound you can't see from the outside, but keeps bleeding on the inside. And the part that makes me hate myself the most is that I once truly loved him. Not a naive love, not just dependence, but a love that made me stay, even as I slowly started to disappear. I once believed he could change. I used to think there was a reason behind everything he did. And now, every time I look at myself in the mirror, I still see traces of the girl who always blamed herself for everything that happened. And even though I'm free now, even though I can sleep without being locked in, even though I can leave without him standing by the door, there's a part of me that still hasn't fully come back. The part that once trusted someone who almost erased me, slowly, silently, without witnesses. And in the end, all I had was myself.